Hey everyone, welcome back to Karenology. This story will have you shaking your head in disbelief. My trash can was gone. Not misplaced, not tipped over, not damaged, just gone. Monday morning, I stepped outside with my usual bag of garbage, expecting to toss it into the bin by my driveway. But all I found was an empty patch of concrete. I looked around, half expecting to see it knocked over by the wind, but there was no trace of it anywhere. A quick scan of the neighborhood showed everyone else's cans lined up neatly, exactly where they should be, except for mine. Annoyed, I walked back inside and called my wife. Lauren was already at work, but she picked up after a few rings. I asked if she had moved the trash can for some reason. She sounded confused, told me no, and then laughed, suggesting maybe someone had stolen it. I chuckled dryly, but deep down, I knew she was probably right. I didn't want to believe it, but I had seen enough petty nonsense in this neighborhood to know that people were capable of anything. After hanging up, I decided to take a walk around the block. I checked behind bushes, along the sidewalks, even peered into some of the neighbors' yards, wondering if some teenager had thought it would be funny to move my can as a prank. That's when I saw it. Sitting neatly beside the garage of my neighbor, Danny Coleman, was a black trash can that looked exactly like mine. Except now, it had a new number scribbled over where my house number had once been. My blood boiled. I marched straight up to Danny's driveway and knocked on his door. A few seconds later, he appeared, wiping his hands on his stained t-shirt, his usual lazy smirk already in place. Before I could even get a word out, he said, "Hey there, Andy. What's up?" I crossed my arms and gestured toward the trash can beside his garage. "That's my bin, Danny. It went missing this morning, and now it's here, with a different number on it. Care to explain?" Danny squinted at the can like he had never seen it before. "This old thing? Nah, man, this one's mine. Had it for years." I clenched my jaw, trying to keep my cool. "Danny, I literally scratched the side of it last month when I was moving my bike. I can see the mark right there. And I know how my own trash can looks." He chuckled, shaking his head. "I think you're mistaken, bud. You know how these garbage bins all look the same? Maybe yours just rolled away in the wind." I inhaled sharply, forcing myself not to yell. "So you're telling me my trash can just rolled away last night, and then coincidentally you suddenly have a brand new one with a fresh number painted over mine? Come on, Danny." His smirk widened. "Andy, you can't go around accusing people of stealing trash cans. You got proof? Maybe check with the garbage company. Maybe they took it by mistake." I knew exactly what he was doing. Danny was the type to take whatever he wanted and then gaslight people into thinking they were the crazy ones for calling him out. I had seen him borrow tools from neighbors and conveniently forget to return them. I had watched him park in other people's driveways when he had guests over, acting surprised when confronted. He lived for petty neighborhood victories like this, and now he thought he had won another one. I let out a slow breath. "Fine. If you won't admit it, then I'll handle it another way." Danny shrugged. "Do what you gotta do, Andy, but don't expect me to take the blame for your missing trash can." I turned around and walked away, fuming. I wasn't about to let him get away with this. If he wanted to play stupid games, he was about to find out that I could play smarter. I had spent years working as a forensic document examiner, analyzing signatures, detecting fraud, and spotting fakes. If he thought a sloppy paint job was going to fool me, he had no idea what he was up against. That night, I went online and ordered a small GPS tracker. I wasn't just going to get my trash can back. I was going to make sure Danny never tried to pull something like this again. And when I caught him red-handed, he wouldn't be able to lie his way out of it. I woke up the next morning to find my brand new trash can missing. Again. This time, I didn't even have to guess where it had gone. I marched straight to Danny's house, expecting to see it neatly tucked beside his garage just like before. But when I got there, it wasn't outside. My gut twisted. Either he had gotten smarter or he was trying something new. Instead of knocking on his door and giving him another chance to lie to my face, I decided to observe first. I walked around the neighborhood casually, pretending to be out for a morning jog. As I rounded the block, I noticed Danny's backyard gate slightly ajar. My trash can wasn't in front of his house because it was in the back. I wasn't sure if he was watching, so I didn't stop. Instead, I went home, grabbed a small stepladder, and returned after dark. My heart pounded as I approached the fence. Peering over, I confirmed what I had suspected. My trash can, parked next to his grill, looking like it belonged there. He had hidden it. I pulled out my phone, snapped a picture, and texted it to Lauren. "Look at this. He put it in his backyard. This guy has no shame." She texted back almost immediately, "Leave it alone. It's a trash can." Is this really worth all this? But it wasn't about the trash can anymore. It was about the principle. Danny had stolen from me, lied to my face about it, and now he was deliberately hiding what wasn't his. It was a game to him, and he thought I was just going to let him win. He was wrong. That night, I put my plan into motion. I attached a GPS tracker to the underside of the trash can. It was small, discreet, and would ping my phone with its location every time it moved. If Danny decided to relocate it again, I would know instantly. By the next morning, I had a new notification. Movement detected. The tracker showed my trash can wasn't in Danny's backyard anymore. It was 3 blocks away, sitting outside a completely different house. My pulse quickened. Was he selling them? Trading them? Why would he move it there? I drove over and knocked on the door. An older woman answered, squinting at me through thick glasses. "Can I help you?" I gestured toward the trash can sitting at the edge of her driveway. "I know this is going to sound strange, but I think that trash can belongs to me." She frowned. "Oh, Danny gave that to me last night. Said it was an extra one he didn't need." I clenched my teeth. "Danny? From 3 blocks over?" She nodded. "Yes, he said he had an extra and figured I could use it." I pulled out my phone, showing her a picture of the can with my house number faintly visible beneath the fresh paint. "Ma'am, I don't mean to cause trouble, but he stole this from me." Her eyes widened. "Oh, I had no idea. Please take it back." I thanked her, loaded the can into my car, and drove home. But I wasn't done yet. Danny needed to know that I wasn't just going to roll over and accept his nonsense. That night, I spray-painted my house number across every side of the trash can in bold, permanent red paint. Then, just for good measure, I scratched my initials into the plastic. If Danny wanted to take it again, he'd have to do it knowing that he couldn't hide it this time. Sure enough, the next morning, the trash can was gone again. But now I had proof. The GPS pinged me immediately. It had moved back to Danny's property. I called the police. I wasn't going to wait around this time. The officer who arrived, Officer Grayson, seemed skeptical at first. "Sir, it's just a trash can. Do you really want to escalate this?" I gestured to my phone. "Look at the GPS history. Look at the picture I took last night. He keeps taking it. He's hiding it. He even gave it away to someone else. This isn't just a misunderstanding. He's stealing my property over and over." Officer Grayson sighed but agreed to check it out. When we walked over to Danny's house, Danny opened the door, already smirking. "Morning, officer. What's going on?" Grayson got straight to the point. "Your neighbor says you took his trash can, again. You mind showing me where yours is?" Danny shrugged and walked us to the side of his house. And there it was. My can, red-painted numbers and all, sitting brazenly next to his recycling bin. I folded my arms. "You were saying?" Danny's face twitched. "Oh, this? I must have grabbed the wrong one by accident. Easy mistake." Grayson didn't buy it. "Sir, you painted over his numbers before? Now you're claiming you took this one by accident? Danny laughed awkwardly. Hey, mistakes happen. Look, I'll give it back. No harm, no foul, right? Grayson narrowed his eyes. That's not how this works. We're filing a report for petty theft. This is clearly not an accident. Danny's face fell. You're joking. Over a trash can? Grayson pulled out his notepad. You've been warned before, and yet here we are. This isn't about the can. It's about the repeated theft. If you don't want to go down for something so ridiculous, I suggest you stop stealing from your neighbors. Danny opened his mouth to argue, but thought better of it. He glared at me as he handed the can back. Hope you're happy, Andy. You really had to call the cops over this? I smiled. Maybe next time don't steal from the wrong guy. As I wheeled my trash can back home, I felt a rush of satisfaction. But I knew it wasn't over. Danny wasn't the type to back down easily. This was just round 2, and if he wanted to keep this game going, I was more than ready to play. The next morning, my trash can was missing again. I stared at the empty spot in disbelief, my blood pressure rising by the second. Danny had just been caught by the police, warned, and yet here we were again. This wasn't just petty theft anymore. This was a deliberate challenge, a taunt, a sign that he wasn't backing down. Lauren sighed when I told her. Andrew, please, let it go. You got it back once. Maybe we should just buy a new one and market better. I shook my head. That's not the point. He's doing this on purpose. He's pushing to see how far he can go. If I let this slide, what's next? My tools? My lawnmower? My car? She rolled her eyes. You really think he's going to steal the car? Maybe not, but if I don't stand up for myself now, he'll think he can take whatever he wants. I pulled out my phone and checked the GPS tracker I had hidden inside the trash can. My heart pounded as I watched the blinking dot. It was on the move. Not just anywhere, but heading toward the other side of town. My mind raced. Why was he taking it so far? This was new. I grabbed my keys and jumped into my truck, tracking the signal in real time. The dot finally stopped outside a construction site. I parked down the block and walked toward the entrance, peering through the gaps in the chain-link fence. There, among a cluster of dumpsters and scattered debris, was my trash can. Danny was standing nearby, talking to a man in a hard hat. I couldn't hear their conversation, but judging by the way Danny gestured toward the can, I had a pretty good idea what was happening. He was trying to get rid of it, not just hide it, dispose of it permanently. I snapped a few pictures with my phone and marched toward them. Danny's eyes widened when he saw me. Andy, what a surprise! What are you doing here? I crossed my arms. I could ask you the same thing. Planning on getting rid of something? He feigned confusion. What are you talking about? I pointed at the trash can. That's mine, and you know it. The construction worker looked between us. Wait, this thing doesn't belong to you? You just told me you needed to dump an old can. Danny forced a laugh. It's just a misunderstanding. I found it abandoned and figured I'd help clean up the neighborhood. I pulled out my phone and showed them the GPS tracking history. Funny how it was abandoned, right after disappearing from my driveway. The worker frowned. Sorry, man. If this is yours, take it back. I don't want any part of this. Danny clenched his jaw but forced another grin. Fine. Take your precious trash can, but this is getting ridiculous. I didn't respond. I just wheeled it back to my truck, my mind spinning. Danny had escalated things. He wasn't just hiding the can anymore. He was trying to make sure I never saw it again. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. That night, I reinforced my trash can with a steel chain, locking it to a post near my garage. I also installed a motion-detecting camera. If Danny so much as breathed near my property, I would know about it. 2 nights later, my phone buzzed with a notification. Motion detected. I sat up in bed and checked the footage. There he was. Danny, sneaking around my driveway, flashlight in hand, inspecting the chain. I watched as he pulled at it, tested its strength, then finally gave up and walked away. The next morning, he greeted me with an exaggerated yawn as he walked to his car. "Morning, Andy. Sleep well?" I smirked. "Like a baby. You?" He grinned. "Like a king. No trash-related nightmares, I hope." "Not at all. But hey, thanks for stopping by last night. You could have knocked." His smile faltered. "What are you talking about?" I pulled out my phone and played the video. His expression darkened. "Oh, come on, Andy. Now you're spying on me? You're taking this way too seriously." I shrugged. "Just protecting my property. You should try it sometime." For the first time, Danny looked genuinely irritated. He stormed off without another word. I knew then that I had finally gotten under his skin, but later that evening, something strange happened. Lauren and I were having dinner when there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find a police officer standing there. "Mr. Miller, we received a complaint about harassment. Your neighbor claims you've been threatening him." I blinked. "What? That's insane. He's the one stealing my stuff." The officer sighed. "Look, I'm not here to take sides. Just keep your distance and avoid escalating things." I clenched my fists. Danny had played his card. He couldn't win, so now he was trying to flip the narrative. But if he thought this was going to make me back down, he had another thing coming. I had a plan. And this time, I was going to end this once and for all. The police complaint changed everything. Danny had played dirty before, but this was a new level of low. He wasn't just stealing my trash can anymore. He was actively trying to paint me as the villain. And if I didn't handle this carefully, it could escalate beyond just a neighborhood dispute. I spent the next day reviewing everything I had. Video footage, GPS tracking records, even the text messages from the old lady who Danny had tricked into taking my trash can. I compiled it all into a neatly organized file. If he was going to play the system against me, I was going to hit back with everything I had. That evening, as I was double-checking my cameras, Lauren sighed from the kitchen. "Andrew, this is getting ridiculous. I get it. Danny's a jerk. But maybe we should just let it go before it gets worse." I looked at her. "It's already worse. He's trying to get the police involved. If I back down now, what's next? He'll claim I vandalized his car? Broke into his house? If he thinks he can paint me as the crazy neighbor, he won't stop." She frowned but didn't argue. She knew I was right. The next day, I made a trip down to the police station. I handed Officer Grayson my compiled evidence and explained everything. Danny's thefts, his lies, his attempt to file a false complaint against me. Grayson listened, flipping through the pages, occasionally nodding. When I finished, he exhaled and leaned back in his chair. "I see what you're saying, Mr. Miller, but unless we catch him in the act, this is still a he said, she said situation. We can't charge him for making a false report unless we prove intent." I clenched my jaw. "So what? He just gets away with it?" Grayson shook his head. "No. What we can do is put him on notice. Make it clear that we're aware of his actions. If he keeps this up, he'll be the one facing charges." It wasn't the full justice I wanted, but it was a start. That night, I set my trap. I placed an old, busted trash can out front, one I had picked up from a junkyard. I spray-painted my house number on it, making it look just like my regular one. And then, I attached a second GPS tracker. Sure enough, by morning, it was gone. The GPS led me straight to Danny's backyard, but this time I didn't just storm over. I called the police. When they arrived, I calmly explained that I had proof Danny had stolen my trash can again. I showed them the GPS history, the footage from my driveway camera, and pointed to the new trash can sitting behind his fence. Danny came out, his face pale. "Oh, come on, Andy. You're really doing this? Calling the cops over a trash can again?" Officer Grayson stepped forward. "Danny, we've had multiple complaints, and now we have solid evidence. I'd advise you to come clean." Danny stammered. Look, it was a mistake. I thought it was abandoned." Grayson's expression didn't change. "That excuse isn't going to fly anymore. We're filing a report for theft. And if you keep this up, we'll escalate the charges." Danny's hands curled into fists. "This is ridiculous! It's just garbage!" I smiled. "Then why do you keep stealing it?" For the first time, Danny had no comeback, but I knew he wasn't finished. Because that night, my house was egged. Lauren found it first, stepping outside in the morning to a driveway covered in shattered eggshells and streaks of yolk. She cursed under her breath and turned to me. "Tell me this isn't connected." I tightened my grip on my coffee mug. "It's connected, and it's exactly what I expected." I checked the cameras. The footage was grainy, but it was clear enough. 3 figures in hoodies, sneaking up to our house in the middle of the night. One of them had the same slight limp that Danny's eldest son had from an old football injury. Danny was getting his family involved now. I took the footage to Officer Grayson, but as expected, he told me it wasn't conclusive enough to press charges. Without a clear face shot, it could be anyone. But I'll have a word with him. A word wasn't going to stop Danny. He had already proven that. He wanted to play dirty? Fine. So could I. I sent an anonymous tip to the county's waste management service, claiming that someone in our neighborhood was illegally dumping stolen bins. I knew they took those complaints seriously. Within 2 days, a county inspector showed up at Danny's house, asking to see his garbage setup. And just like I suspected, they found something interesting. He had 5 extra trash cans, all with house numbers scratched off. They fined him on the spot for improper waste disposal. Not a major charge, but enough to sting. That evening, Danny was waiting for me when I got home. His face was red, his fists clenched. "You think you're funny? Calling in the county?" I smiled. "I don't know what you're talking about, Danny. Maybe if you stopped hoarding stolen trash cans, you wouldn't have these problems." He stepped closer. "You don't want to make me your enemy, Andy." I didn't flinch. "You've been my enemy for a while now, Danny, and every time you come at me, I hit back harder. Keep that in mind." For a long moment, he just stared at me. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away. But I wasn't done yet, because I had one last move to play. And after this, Danny was going to regret ever touching my trash can in the first place. Danny thought he could get away with everything. He thought that if he pushed hard enough, if he twisted the narrative just the right way, he could make me the villain and himself the victim. But he had underestimated me. I had been patient. I had been methodical. And now it was time for the final move. The morning after our last conversation, I checked my cameras again. Nothing unusual. But I knew Danny well enough by now. He wouldn't let things go just because he had been fined by the county. He was a creature of stubborn pride, and like a cornered rat, he would strike again. I didn't have to wait long. That night, I was woken up by my phone buzzing with a motion alert. I grabbed it off the nightstand and clicked the notification. The feed loaded in seconds, and there he was, Danny, creeping up my driveway, a spray can in hand. My stomach clenched, but I forced myself to stay calm. I watched as he shook the can, crouched near my garage door, and started spraying something. I didn't move. I let him finish. Let him incriminate himself. When he was done, he tossed the can into my bushes and hurried back toward his house. I got out of bed, grabbed my phone, and stepped outside. The smell of paint was fresh in the cool night air. I turned on the porch light and saw the message he had left. A bright red slur scrawled across my garage door. A threat. A final act of defiance. I snapped a picture, then turned and walked straight to my truck. This was it. I had given him every opportunity to back down. Now, I was going to end this. The next morning, I filed a vandalism report with the police. This time, I didn't just go to Officer Grayson. I went higher. I took my evidence directly to the department's supervisor, showed them the footage, the repeated thefts, the false police report, the illegal dumping of stolen trash cans. And finally, I showed them the fresh vandalism. They took one look at the growing case file and decided enough was enough. That afternoon, a police cruiser rolled up to Danny's house. I stood by my driveway, arms crossed, as the officers knocked on his door. It took him a while to answer, and when he did, he tried his usual routine, acting confused, pretending he had no idea what was going on. But the cops weren't buying it this time. They showed him the footage, showed him the fines, showed him the vandalism report. His smirk wavered, and for the first time since this entire ordeal started, I saw something close to panic in his eyes. They put him in cuffs. As they led him to the squad car, he shot me a glare. "You happy now, Andy? Over a damn trash can?" I smiled. "You did this to yourself, Danny. Should have just bought your own." They drove off, and the neighborhood was finally silent. I stood there for a long moment, letting it all sink in. It wasn't about the trash can. It had never been about the trash can. It was about standing up for what was right. About making sure that people like Danny didn't get away with thinking they could take whatever they wanted and face no consequences. A few days later, I got a call from Officer Grayson. Danny had been charged with misdemeanor theft, vandalism, and filing a false police report. He wouldn't serve real jail time, but he would be paying fines, attending mandatory community service, and, most importantly, he would have a criminal record now. Lauren shook her head when I told her, "I can't believe it actually went this far." I shrugged. "I can. He thought he was untouchable. People like that always do." And just like that, the war was over. My trash can remained where it belonged. Danny's house went up for sale a few months later. No one in the neighborhood seemed particularly sad to see him go. I didn't gloat. Didn't rub it in. I just watched as he packed up his things, loaded them into a moving truck, and drove away for good. And as I wheeled my trash can back to its rightful place, I couldn't help but smile. Victory, as it turned out, smelled a lot like fresh garbage.